This happened back in the winter of 2011. I was driving an old Chevy down a back highway during a heavy snowstorm. It was sometime past midnight. I can't remember the exact time, but the highway wasn't exactly busy anymore, especially in weather like that. My girlfriend was with me, passed out in the passenger seat, wrapped up in a blanket. We were heading to the next town over. She had family out there, and we figured we'd spend a few days away. I remember the snow making everything feel quieter than usual, like the whole world was muffled. We'd been following behind an SUV for a while, maybe 20 minutes or so. I did not think anything of it until they started slowing down, and eventually came to a full stop right there in the middle of the road. I tapped the brakes and eased to a stop behind them. I was trying to see what they were doing, but between the snow and the dark, I couldn't make much out. Eventually, I pulled slightly to the side so I could see ahead better. That's when I noticed the truck. It was parked crossways on the road, like someone had skidded to a stop. Driver and passenger doors both wide open. There were 2 clean sets of boot prints in the snow, leading off the road and straight into the trees. They did not look panicked, just steady, one beside the other, like 2 people walking with purpose. I sat there for a second, trying to figure it out. I did not see any smoke or steam coming from the truck, no signs of an accident. My first thought was maybe someone had slid off the road and gone to get help, but that did not make sense either. Who leaves both doors wide open in the middle of a snowstorm? I threw the car in park and told my girlfriend to stay inside. She barely woke up. I walked up to the truck. Snow was falling hard, but I noticed right away that not much had built up inside the cab yet. That meant the doors hadn't been open for long, maybe 5 minutes max. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass, just open doors and footprints disappearing into the woods. I remember thinking maybe someone was hurt, so I started to follow the prints into the trees. I did not make it more than 10 or 15 feet before I heard someone call out behind me. It was the guy from the SUV. He waved me over and told me not to go into the woods. Said he'd just gotten off the phone with Highway Patrol and that the truck had been reported stolen earlier that week. His tone was calm but firm. He wasn't panicking, but you could tell something did not sit right with him. I paused, looked back at the tracks. Something about the way they disappeared into the trees just felt wrong. The snow was so thick and quiet, you'd think you could hear anything in there, but I couldn't. Not a single sound. Just that silence that comes when the snow eats up all the noise. The guy said again that the patrol was coming and that they'd take it from there. I figured he was probably right, so I walked back to the car. We sat there for maybe another 10 minutes before we decided to head on. The SUV stayed behind. I remember checking the rearview mirror a few times as we drove off, still wondering what the hell I had almost walked into. 2 days later, I saw a post online from the local news station. Turns out the truck belonged to a man who lived just outside of town. He'd been missing for over a week. His family had been posting about it nonstop on social media. Police searched the woods near where the truck had been abandoned. They found the man's body in a shallow ditch maybe 40 yards in. One shot to the back of the head. Just like that. No sign of the shooter. No indication of a struggle. The report said that the tracks led to where the body was found, but did not say anything about the tracks leading away. Reading that made my stomach drop. I kept thinking back to those prints in the snow. I was seconds away from walking straight into that scene. Hell, if we arrived even 2 minutes earlier, we might have heard the shot. Or worse. I don't like to think about it, but I do sometimes wonder, if I had followed the tracks just a little further, would I have found the body before the cops did? Or would someone else have found me too? That highway still gives me the creeps. I don't take it anymore, no matter what time of year it is. Sometimes the silence in the snow isn't peaceful. It's hiding something. I'm an average-sized girl, early 20s when this happened, living in a relatively safe and busy city. I was working a late shift at a restaurant, and usually got off around midnight. I did not own a car, so I biked everywhere. My ride home was about 15 minutes, mostly along a straight bike trail that ran parallel to the train tracks. The path had a few exits into neighborhoods and side streets, but once you passed a certain point, it became more isolated and darker. There were a couple of dim streetlights scattered along the way, but nothing consistent. Without my front bike light, I would not have been able to see anything. That night, I clocked out a little past 12 midnight and started my ride home like usual. The restaurant was in a well-lit part of the city, so it was normal to see a few other late-night riders, especially in the summer when it stayed warm late. But not that far into the ride, I noticed someone biking behind me. Again, not that weird. This trail was used often by people cutting through to nearby towns. What did strike me a little odd was that they did not have any lights on their bike. Not a headlight, not a taillight, just a dark silhouette riding behind me. At first, I told myself it was probably just a dead battery, or maybe they were in a rush and forgot to charge it. I kept riding, glancing back occasionally, and noticed they were keeping pace with me, but not closing in or falling back. A few minutes passed, and I reached one of the main exits that led into a residential area. Usually, most people peeled off here, but this person didn't. They stayed on the trail, still behind me. This is when my stomach started to feel off. I was trying not to overthink. I told myself I was probably just getting tired and letting the dark and the quiet mess with my head. But I had this uncomfortable feeling that wouldn't go away. To be safe, I slowed down a bit to give them a chance to pass. The trail was wide enough for two people to ride side by side. But instead of overtaking me, the person slowed down too, matching my speed almost exactly. They did not get closer, did not say anything, just kept a consistent distance between me. Now I was sure something was off. Instead of going straight home, I decided to take a few random turns once I got off the trail and entered my neighborhood. I did not want to lead someone straight to my house if I was being followed. I took a few lefts and rights at random, through cul-de-sacs and streets I didn't normally use. I did not stop or hesitate, just kept pedaling like I had a destination. But every turn I took, the guy was still behind me. Not close enough that I could get a good look at him, but not far enough for it to feel like coincidence anymore. I was intentionally taking inefficient routes. No one just casually follows someone into a random, quiet street with no real exits unless they mean to. I kept going, trying not to panic. I felt myself breathing harder and had to remind myself to keep my pace steady, not let on that I was scared. Eventually, I realized I was coming up on another dark bike path, a narrow one with no lights and no houses immediately nearby. I did not want to be anywhere near it if this person was still behind me. So at the last second, I veered off into a nearby driveway and slipped into the shadows by the garage. I ducked behind a car parked there and waited. A few seconds later, I heard him pass. I couldn't see his face, but I heard the brakes. He had stopped right at the edge of that bike path, like he was waiting to see where I went. I stayed still, holding my breath. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking from the adrenaline. After what felt like forever, I crept out from the shadows, hopped back on my bike, and went a different direction, cutting across a few more side streets and looping around to make sure I had really lost him. At one point, I stopped at an intersection and just stared back down the street. I couldn't see him anymore. I have no idea if he saw me hiding or realized I had caught on, but he never showed up again. When I finally got home, I locked my bike, bolted the door, and just stood there in my kitchen for a few minutes trying to calm down. I kept playing it over in my head, trying to come up with a logical explanation for why someone would follow me like that and not say a word. And to this day, I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. I'm just glad I trusted my gut and did not lead him to my front door. Now, I used to have this buddy who lived just a few streets over in the same neighborhood. We weren't best friends or anything, but we hung out often enough. One night, we were in his backyard having a couple of beers and playing cards. It was a pretty chill evening, to be honest. No one else was there with us, just the two of us, shooting the shit and enjoying the weather. I remember it clearly because it wasn't anything special, just a normal night. At some point, I looked at my phone and saw that it was just before 10. I had stuff to take care of the next morning, so I told him I was going to head out. I wasn't drunk. I'd only had 2 Coors Lights the entire time I was there. I wasn't tired either, which is worth mentioning, because if I had been, maybe I could blame what happened next on sleepwalking or something. Anyway, I walked home like I always did. His place is maybe a 15-minute walk, door to door, if that. It was a warm night, clear sky, quiet neighborhood, uneventful in every way. I walked the route I always take, past the same houses, didn't see a single car or person the whole way. But when I got to my house, my roommate was coming out the front door, fully dressed for work with a travel mug of coffee in his hand. I gave him a casual, "Hey," and started pulling my keys out of my pocket, and he gave me this weird look. He said, "I thought you were home already. Your truck's in the driveway." I told him, "Yeah, I just got back from hanging out at Kyle's." Then he squinted and asked, "Are you drunk or something?" I was confused by the question because, like I said, I wasn't drunk. Then he says, "You know it's 5 o'clock in the morning, right?" I actually laughed at him. I thought he was messing with me, but his face did not change. He was serious. I looked at my phone. 5:08 a.m. I stood there in total disbelief, just staring at the screen like it would change if I kept looking at it. My roommate got in his car and left, and I walked inside in a daze. I stood in the living room for a while, just pacing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew I left Kyle's at 10. I remembered walking home. There was no point where time felt weird or anything. Eventually, I called Kyle. He answered, groggy as hell, and confirmed I had left a little before 10. I did not know what to say. I just said something like, "Okay, sorry to wake you," and hung up. The next few hours, I just sat there thinking, trying to retrace every step in my head. I kept checking my phone, looking at texts, calls, anything that could show what happened between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. There was nothing. No texts, no calls, no photos, nothing unusual. It's like those 7 hours just didn't exist. I checked myself over to see if maybe I had fallen or hit my head or something, but there were no cuts or bruises, no soreness, nothing. My clothes were clean. My shoes weren't even dirty. I even checked my location history on Google Maps. Nothing showed after 10:04 p.m., which is when I left Kyle's address. Then the next pin was at 5:06 a.m. at my house. I did not report it or anything. What would I say? That I lost track of 7 hours walking home from a buddy's house? And the weirdest part is how normal everything felt. I wasn't disoriented when I got to my door. I did not feel groggy or slow like you would after a blackout. I felt exactly like someone who had just walked for 15 minutes on a quiet night. To this day, I've never had another episode like that. I've never passed out randomly. No history of seizures, no meds that could cause that. Nothing like that in my medical history. I've told a few people this story over the years. Some joke about aliens or abductions. Others say maybe I got drugged. But I always come back to that same thing. There's no logical explanation that makes sense. I did not drink enough to pass out. I wasn't tired. There's no way someone could have slipped something into my drink without Kyle noticing, and he swears he never left my side the whole time we were hanging out. It's been years since this happened, and I still think about it. Not often, but every now and then. Just this weird cold feeling that creeps up my spine when I remember walking up to my house, thinking it was 10 p.m., and seeing my roommate heading to work instead. I don't know what happened to that time, and I probably never will. But something did, and that scares the hell out of me.